This video is brought to you by my lovely patrons Thomas Johnson, James Rapp, Lewis, John Mezzo, Mike Rand, and a special shout out to Cameron Strauss for his contributions to today's video. For as little as $3 a month, you can get your name shouted out at the start of every Saw1 video, as well as access to bonus behind the scenes content. He's often held up as our greatest Prime Minister of all time, and 4 election wins of which he increased his seat count 3 times certainly seems to back that opinion. But was Hawke really our greatest Prime Minister? Let's find out as I put our 23rd Prime Minister in the spotlight. To me, Bob Hawke is a man who not only got dealt a very good deck of metaphorical cards when it came to the political landscape of the 1980s, but also knew how to play those cards extremely well. What exactly do I mean by that? Well, as I covered in my 1983 election video, Hawke was born in 1929 Bordertown, South Australia. He would quickly grow up a child prodigy, winning Oxford scholarships in beer drinking games to become president of the Council of Trade Unions and later president of the Federal Labor Party right around the same time Whitlam took office, and this would benefit him massively having such an executive position, although it would take a toll on his health. However, Hawke would make a quick turnaround and soon found himself on the rise again when he got elected to Parliament in 1980. Due to his charisma, he soon found himself outpolling both Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser and opposition leader Bill Hayden, and it was only a matter of time before he became leader of the Labour Party. That moment could not have come a day later, as the very day Hawke became opposition leader was the same day Fraser called the 1983 election, of which Hawke would win comfortably. Hawke knew that previous Labour governments had been too ambitious, and that ambition had been their downfall. Thus Hawke would instead follow the lead of his predecessor Fraser, and would keep the vast majority of the previous government's agenda intact, instead slowly modifying it over time. Not only would Hawke take on a moderate agenda, he would also move the Labour Party away from its completely pro-union stance with the Price and Incomes Accord, which saw the Labour Party bring unions and business leaders together to create a system in which workers could still receive fair work and pay without the need for mass strikes. While I commend Hawke for such a move, I do take issue with the aftermath of the Accords, in effect making it somewhat difficult for unions to flex their power to push for better work conditions. Hawke was also one of the key players in the presidentifying of our government. By presidentifying, I refer to making the government less about the party in charge but the man in charge, that man being the Prime Minister himself. As a big supporter of the parliamentary systems over presidential systems, I have not been a huge fan of our nation putting so much focus on the Prime Minister over the party as a whole, and Hawke was by far one of the biggest figures in creating such an image. Hawke would also pass other right-leaning policies such as deregulation of the economy, reintroduction of university fees, as well as large tax cuts for high-income earners. These were partly done to match up with the more extreme reforms taking place in Britain under Thatcher and America under Reagan. Despite the more right-wing economic agenda, Hawke would still take a strong stance on the environment, as seen with his move to stop the Franklin Dam project, as well as his reforms to healthcare and creating the modern Medicare system. While I personally might not be a huge fan of Hawke's overall agenda, I also acknowledge the 1980s as a time of mass liberalism in the economy in the wake of the 1970 economic woes. Hawke's more right-wing stance on the economy certainly got him support from all over the ideological spectrum, and this was partly why he was able to win 4 elections to become the most electorally successful Labour leader of all time. Thus I feel like we should be thankful that we did not get to face the full brunt of 1980s Reaganism and Thatcherism with its union-busting and pro-business agenda. Going over to my patrons, we have Cameron Strauss, who says, "For me, what I really appreciated about Hawke, and by extension Keating's governments, is that at an era where unions were busted, services were cut, and deregulation went extreme in the US and UK, Hawke kept Australia from this to a large extent. Instead he negotiated with unions, services like Medicare were introduced, and to the extent that deregulation did occur, it's far more considerate and targeted, so Australia didn't become economically isolated, while still improving the standards of living. And today Australia is more stable and fairer than the US and UK. And that's why I'm so thankful to Hawke and his government, even if I disagree with some of his policies in today's context." Going over to YouTube, we also have Pepe R, who says, "Bob Hawke's government is often overappreciated for his successes, while his successor and Treasurer Paul Keating, who was one behind most of Hawke's government's economic policy, is forgotten by many. Bob Hawke was a very good man, but only a decent Prime Minister compared to his successor." The UK Conservative Party chairman Sethi says, Bob Hawke was an Australian Prime Minister and Labor leader who truly led the country towards neoliberalism and the free market. He did a great job of creating an image of the Labor Party being economically competent. This was all despite other Western nations closest to Australia like the United States and United Kingdom embracing more right-wing party leaders like Thatcher and Reagan. It truly did help create the image Australia has today and set the political mood and agenda all the way until Tony Abbott's time in power. It can't be understood how he is likely the most important Australian Prime Minister, which is something I believe both the right and left can agree upon, even if that's for different reasons. E.M. Kidgell says, Bob Hawke was the face, but the treasurer was the brains. While his government is remembered for more things than Fraser or Whitlam's, he's most famously remembered for launching Medicare, saving the Franklin River in Tassie, outlawing gender discrimination in the workplace, and floating the Australian dollar. He was also a union leader and was seen as the man of the Australian people, and is widely considered to be our best Prime Minister to date. While I don't hold Hawke in as high regard as I do Whitlam or other Labour leaders, I cannot deny that he was a competent man that knew how to walk the political centre and lead the Labour Party through their longest period in government. However, Hawke wasn't the only power behind the 1980s Labour government, and that other individual was the man who we'll be putting in the spotlight next time when we talk about Paul Keating. Be sure to get your comments in and I'll read them out in my next video. Until then, bye.